Hello, hello, good evening. And you may hear some background noise. This is a noisy part of the city, and it can get quite noisy, especially at night. But I thank you very much for joining me here. Day 59. We're really 59 days to go. We're just a little bit over 59 days now away from the general election night. But election night will be beginning very, very soon for several states across this country. And the reality is that we have to start voting right now. We have to be prepared to vote. We have to read up on the guidelines. For those of us who aren't familiar with our state's guidelines, now is the time to familiarize yourself. I have myself. Many people have done this. You've probably seen a number of media organizations and other organizations put out a comprehensive voting guide for every state. Well, stations unfortunately, do not have information that is accurate. And that's a real concern to me. I'm sure it is to you as well. So, what I decided to do was make up a guide. It took several weeks, but look, it's done now. Finally got it finished this week and put together a guide of every state, all 50 states and the District of Columbia, with their Secretary of State websites, which means the official websites for every state. So you know it's coming straight from the horse's mouth. It's from the official Secretary of State. It's their website. So all the links that you see on this guide that I have a link to with this video, and that you will see all the links, all the information that I have put down in this long document comes directly from the secretaries of state from every single state in the country. And that's about as official as it gets. So off whatever. I mean, this guide that I put together is very comprehensive. And what's more, I'm adding to it every single day. I'm updating it if necessary. That you see in this YouTube live video and that I have posted on. I just want to start by saying that if you're finding anything confusing in that guide, let me know. I will warn you, there is a lot of information, a lot of links, very few pictures. This is all hardcore, solid information. I've got absentee ballot information. I've got links to add applications for absentee ballots. Everything that you need for your state is there. Phone numbers, email addresses, frequently asked questions. I've got links to everything. So you have still provided the site for you as well, so that you can go to the site and click around. And then all the other things that are available that you can do, instead of you hunting around for them, I have put them right there on this document. So it will save you a lot of time. You can just go to the links and I will be adding things continuously and updating. So I'll just say this, first of all, that the early voting states coming up in the next week or two, literally 2 weeks from now, you've got at least 4 states starting September the 18th. That's 2 Fridays from now. You've got Virginia voting starting September 18th. You've got Wisconsin, a key state, of course, that's voting beginning on September 18th. You've also got Vermont voting on September 18th. These are just 3 or 4 of the states that are going to kick us off here. And as you may or may not know, on this Friday, the 4th of September, North Carolina began mailing out ballots. Now, this is what I want to get to. Do not wait for your state to mail you your mail-in ballot. What you should be doing now is being proactive, meaning go ahead, contact your Secretary of State's office, go to the list that I have linked, that I've created, go to your Secretary of State's website or go to my list of all the sites and look for the absentee ballot application or to the area for FAQs. Just go to this appropriate state's Secretary of State website, and I'm telling you, go ahead or call them, email them, and ask them for your ballot. If you are willing to go and pick up the ballot, if they have it, please do so. If they don't have that ballot ready, ask them for when it's going to be mailed out and tell them you want that ballot right now, please, because these next 59 days are going to go by like that. And so it's imperative that we get proactive now. This is the time to get moving. And this is also a time to familiarize yourself with the state's voting laws. There's lots of states that have photo ID laws. You do not want to be rushing around trying to get all of that stuff together a few days before you're ready to vote early. And this is the critical thing. This is the real subject of why I'm doing this tonight in this video, is that the key to winning this election in November is early voting. That is the key. If we house, it is imperative that you vote early. The first day of early voting is when you should vote. I cannot underscore that anymore. We will win this election if you vote early. It is that simple. Why do I say that? Because the ballots will have been tabulated in some states even before we get to election day. And with key states like Wisconsin voting early, key states like Minnesota is a key state. That's a state that Joe Biden actually is heavily concentrating on. Key states like these are going to play a role. I mean, all of these states are very important. But if you go and vote early, you drop that mail ballot off at a drop box, at your post office, if you're still trusting the post office, if that's what you want to do, or drop it off at your Secretary of State's office, or at optimally, your county clerk's office. Now, they call them different things in each of the 50 states. The county clerk's office is basically the county in which you live in your state. That is the office that is the place that gives you your polling location and everything like that. If you have a ballot that you have filled out, you want to drop it off at that location. It's sometimes called the municipal clerk's office, depending on what state you're in. It's sometimes called, as I said, the county clerk's office. It's sometimes called the voter registrar's office. There are different names for this particular office, but they all mean the same thing. What it essentially is, it's sometimes called Board of Elections. I know in San Francisco it's called the Board of Elections. They all mean the same thing. And what it is your local precinct office. It's your local office that handles your balloting and all of that kind of thing. I have provided links to those on every single state. You can find out where your county board of elections is, your county clerk. I've given links in pretty much every single state. I will review that, but you will be able to find easily on the document that I've put together that is linked to this video where your county board of elections is. All you have to do is just click on it. There'll be a map in some cases where you'll have all the counties of your state. You just click on the county that you live in, and you can find out if you don't know what county you live in. You can find that out too by typing in your address, and that will give you the answer. There are some of these states that have drop-down menus, and then you see all the counties and then you select them. So there's a lot of information. A good idea is to start familiarizing yourself with the information, orient yourself to it, because there's a lot of information. And you really have to get into a mindset right now about voting, even if you're not going to be early voting until the beginning of October, which is only a month away now. I think the object of why I'm doing this video at this moment is obviously to orient you, to get you into the mindset of being prepared to vote, of you having a full understanding of what you need to do to vote. Now, there's going to be some states that have photo ID laws. As I said earlier, you want to make sure you have all of that stuff prepared now so that you're not scrambling around a day or two before you vote, a week or two before you vote. And I really want to preface this by saying it's got to be early vote. Now I get it that there are people who love to go to the polls on election night. But I'm telling you right now, I would not take that chance. Not only because we have seen in the primaries earlier this year, if you remember those, in some of these states, people were lining up for 10, 11, 12 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours. And with the coronavirus running rampant, we have now about 100, at the time I'm making this video, about 190,000 people dead. By the end of this year, there are some forecasts that are saying that we could have something like 410,000 people dead in the United States from coronavirus. Now, if you still want to go on November 3rd to your precinct, well, you're taking a chance and good on you, but you are taking a risk because even with a mask on, even with gloves, you are going to be standing in some of these states, particularly if you are living in a predominantly Black community, a predominantly Latinx community, a predominantly Native American community, and even some of the youth communities in college campuses and things, you're going to be standing on lines. We've seen this in Atlanta. If you cast your mind back just a few short months, if you remember back in the early summer of 2020, this year, in Atlanta, there were long lines in predominantly Black neighborhoods because you know what the Republicans are doing. They've been doing the same thing for years. And you have a Republican governor in the state of Georgia who got into his position as governor by stealing from a Black woman who should be the governor right now. Be that as it may, I want to cast you back to the times just a few short months ago when we had primaries in this country, and you had a number of states. You had Kentucky, and there were long lines. People were banging the front of the convention center there to get in because they'd been shut out. They were waiting on these long lines, and the convention center was the only place they could vote. Houston, Texas, back in March on Super Tuesday or thereabouts, back in March of this year, you had a guy on that line for 9 hours. He didn't finish voting, and he didn't finally get to vote until 1:30 the next morning. Joe Biden won. There were people standing on lines for a long time. There were situations where there were voters, predominantly Black voters, and some poor white voters, who were going to their precinct to vote in person, only to find out that their precinct had been closed. They never had been notified about this until they got to the precinct. We had in Wisconsin. Remember that in Wisconsin back in April of this year when people were standing on lines and the masks and that picture that will forever go down in history of a woman holding a sign that said, "This is ridiculous." And people got COVID-19. It's not sure that they all came from the voting, but there were tests done and there was a higher rate of infection from coronavirus within 2 weeks from people standing on these long lines. So I offer those examples to you as just to make sure. I mean, if you are sure that you are comfortable standing on a long line on election night, you are. I'm going to just be blunt about it. You're taking a very dangerous chance, given what I've just told you. Given the fact that on election night, you could, depending on what state you're in, you could go to a polling place, especially if you are in a Republican governor's state. You could go to that polling place and find out that it's been shut. Texas has been doing this for years now. There's a comprehensive article about it in The Guardian from, I believe, either this year or last year, where they have closed hundreds of precincts And most of them are in, hey presto, Latinx and Black neighborhoods. If you want to take that chance, you take that chance. But I would strongly advise you against doing so. I would absolutely say to you, vote early. Because here's a reason to vote early. There are going to be less people around. The earlier you vote, the fewer crowds there are going to be. If you drop your ballot off in person, that's one thing. If you decide to go and show up in person at your local city hall, at your local precinct, at the designated areas, and the links in my document will tell you where you need to go, and it will be very clear to you, then I would strongly advise you to do it early. Believe me, there'll be less stress, there'll be less people, there'll be much more physical distancing, which will be easier, and you won't have to stand on the line for 12 hours. Particularly if you are Black, particularly if you are Latinx, particularly if you are Native, particularly if you are Asian. There are lots of areas where Asian Americans are being targeted. So that is the biggest reason why I say to you to go and vote early. I would say the first day of early voting. I really would. And that's where this list that I have comes in. And I will later on, at some point, the next day or two, I will have a comprehensive list where I boil down exactly the dates for early voting so you can look at them all in one place. But my document has lists starting from, in alphabetical order, every state, including the District of Columbia as well, the District of Columbia, DC, included in there with the 50 states. And you will see the early voting dates, you will see absentee ballot deadlines, voter registration deadlines. But I've got to tell you something about voter registration. You have to do it now. Do not wait till the day before. There have been stories, I know of people who have tried to register to vote the day before or on the night where the deadline is, and the website has crashed. Why? Because everybody's trying to do this at the last minute, and you know what happens? You put pressure on a system that is already besieged by so many people trying to get in to register to vote online, and voila, what happens? The website crashes. You don't get your registration in. The deadline passes and you are SOL. This is what happened when people were applying for unemployment during the earlier days of this pandemic. They all went on these websites and they did it at a certain point of the day or late in the deadline or whatever it might have been. And their websites, these states' websites, crashed. They could not handle the volume of people trying at the same time to do it. So what people did was, in the middle of the night, they would go on these sites and do this. And my strongest recommendation to people right now watching this is to, if you are not registered to vote, please do it now. Do it now. Do it now, because if you leave this to the end, and I know people love to procrastinate or they find themselves doing that, they've got lots of things going on, so maybe they can't do it. But please give yourself 10 minutes to register to vote. It literally takes about 10 minutes or less. Most of these states have online voter registration, and you will see it in the list that I have. Some of the states require that you fill out a voter registration application, but you have to mail that back in. So what I would advise people to do, if you are in a state, I know that Mississippi is one of these kinds of states. I believe there are several others, but Mississippi definitely is one of those states where you have to fill out the form, and you can fill it out online or print it out. And well, you have to print it out anyway. And you'll have to fill that out. You can fill it out online, I think, in many of these situations. Sometimes you cannot fill in the PDF, so you have to actually print it out. But whatever, you're going to have to print that out, because then they supply an envelope or an address in many of these states. And you have to actually physically mail that back in or drop it off at your county board of elections. And maybe you can call your county board of elections and just say to them, here's my completed voter registration. They should be able to accept that. You can call them, you can email them. And then you can go to the Board of Elections if you can get there, if you're able to do so. Have someone drive you there if you cannot get there. Remember, I know this is a pandemic that we're in, and people are willing, as we've seen in these last few months, they're willing to risk it. They're willing to risk it. But now that we've got this general election, I think you're going to have an overwhelming turnout. North Carolina today, I mean, had 3 times as many requests for a mail in ballot than they did just 4 years ago. So that tells you that there are going to be a ton more people voting. I had heard something today on one of these news networks that said that a third of the requests of the increase, a third of the increase in these ballots that are being requested are coming from people under the age of 30, or rather 35, which tells me something. That tells me that the youth obviously are getting involved. And if the youth are getting involved in this election, which they didn't really do as much 4 years ago, that is bad news for the guy that's currently in the White House. And if that is the case, that a third of these brand new requests that have been through the roof are coming from people who are under 35 years old, that spells trouble. Now, with that said, do not believe the polls. I'm telling you, ignore them. A lot of people did not ignore them 4 years ago. And they saw that Hillary Clinton had this big lead. And some of them turned off and said, well, I don't need to go and vote. A lot of people stayed home for various reasons. It wasn't just the polls. But a lot of people got fooled by the polls, in my opinion, including people I know. Oh, I'm not going to bother voting for her because, well, she's got it wrapped up. I hope people have now learned that lesson and learned from that lesson. I hope the people realize that any poll that shows Joe Biden up, I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't trust any poll that shows anything, whether it's Joe Biden up or the guy in the White House who is up. It doesn't matter. These polls don't mean anything. These polls are for two people. They're for the two candidates and they're for the pollsters. The general public are really not the subject of these polls, even though they're interviewing people from the general public. There's all kinds of issues that go into this. It's a snapshot of time. There's a margin of error, and people lie on polls. Not everybody, but there are people who lie in polls. Besides the undecided thing, there's very few undecided people out there. They're either going to go vote one way or another. And another thing you should be aware of is you still have other candidates besides these two on the ballot, which is why I think it's imperative you get out there and vote early. And I think, you've got to vote for Joe Biden. I'm sorry. I'm not even going to say that anymore. I'm not sorry to say it. If you would like to see a change in the White House, you will have to vote early. You will have to vote early. It's as simple as that. Do not take anything for granted. Spread the word to friends and family. If you're going to vote and you have family with you, bring them with you to the polls. If they're in proximity to you, if you can get to them, drive them with you to the polls to the extent that it's safe. Family members, if you're not living in the same place, bring your mask, bring your gloves, go and vote early. I'm telling you, this is going to be so much more advantageous to people who want to see a change in the White House. Furthermore, make sure as well, if you want this process to go by even faster, make sure that you take a look at the ballot in your state. Now, some of these states have already printed up what the ballots are and what is going to be on the ballot, whether it's state races, local races, obviously the presidential race, Senate races, governor races, House races. Familiarize yourself right now with what that ballot is looking like in your state, so that this is not a mighty rush of blood to your head when you get inside that voting booth. And if the ballot is available, you can check the document that I have put together and see if there is a ballot ready in your state. Look at what it says. Write down your choices. Write down who you're voting for on a piece of paper. You can spend the time at home doing the legwork of looking at the ballot in advance on the Secretary of State's website. Many of them are already available now. The ballots are already available online. All you have to do is put down answers on a piece of paper and bring that piece of paper with you into the voting booth when you write that stuff out. Just fill out the ballot that you are writing on or whatever it is. There's no law against writing out your answers at home and then bringing them with you to the polling booth. There's no law that forbids that, far as I know. Certainly it's okay to do that here in California. And there's nothing that says you cannot do that anywhere. So that's another thing. So that it reduces the amount of time you are spending, even in the early voting process, reduces the amount of time you are spending in the ballot box and in the voting booth. You may only end up being in there for half an hour or less. Because if you've prepared your answers already, you already know who you're going to vote for and you've written that down, all you have to do is just transfer that onto your ballot once you are at your polling station. That won't take more than, depending on the ballots, now every ballot's different, obviously, in every state. And then even district to district, it changes and is different. But it's not going to take as long as if you go in there and you have absolutely no idea what you're going to see, and you go into it cold, and you're in there for an hour and a half. And if you are someone who insists on going on election night, can you imagine the stress? Can you imagine the anguish and the anxiety? People are going to be. Look, I'm not being a doomsayer here. I'm just being a realist because I've seen this scenario. I have worked as a poll worker. I'm sure there are people who are watching this who have worked as poll workers or committee captains. I've worked as a precinct captain. And there are other people, I'm sure, who are watching who have done that or know people who have. And I'm telling you, election night is very stressful. I mean, for me, just observing the way people were behaving, it was stressful. Just to witness that, just to be in that atmosphere. And for those of you who still are saying, well, I'm going to go on November 3rd, be aware that it's going to be very stressful. People are already on edge in this country as it is. So, again, that's your call. If you're still going to do this on election night, and with all the other things we're hearing, having people observing the polls, I mean, people who are in uniform, that the guy in the White House is saying, I'm going to send 50,000 people to observe the polls. Well, they're not observing anything. They are there to intimidate. So if you are still, after that, you're still willing to take that chance on November 3rd to do this, that's entirely your call, of course. But I'm telling you, the best way for us to make a change in this election so that there is a new occupant in the White House on the 20th of January next year is to vote early, and make sure you vote on day one of early voting. Don't do what Donald Trump says, because he wants people in some states to vote twice. Right now, we have to have a mentality right now that says, I'm going to vote. And not only that, I'm going to tell my friends and family, and I'm going to bring people, preferably family members, obviously, and make sure that they're all wearing masks. And I'm going to bring them with me to the polls. I'm going to pick up my relative. You should be making right now. Honestly, that really is. We are in September. We've just gone, what, September 4th on the East Coast right now. We've turned to September the 5th in the UK right now. Obviously, you are, in your morning, fully in the morning in September the 5th on a Saturday. And there are overseas voters. So, overseas voters, you guys also have to get your ballots in early, mail them in early. Do not wait. Demand your ballot. Early voting is the key. And North Carolina already has had, again, this influx of absentee ballot requests. And for every other state in the country, as I say, do not wait for the state to mail the ballot out for you. Be proactive. My three things have always been, when it comes to voting: vote in person, preferably early, as early as possible. First day of early voting, that's what I would do. Also, number two, be proactive. And number three, share the information with family and friends. Make sure that you tell your friends and your family that early voting is the key. And also pass on to them this list that you see in this video. Make sure that you do have a strategy. Make sure that you do have a strategy, a backup plan. Make sure you are familiar with the voter ID law, the photo ID law. I mentioned that. Make sure that you are aware of what the voting deadlines are. I've got a list of them, and I will constantly update these, and they are all coming from the Secretaries of State. So these are official websites. This is where you want to go, honestly. Every one of the links I have is linked to the Secretary of State. So that's as simple as it gets. And I hope that people really do take to heart what I am saying here. Day 59, we are many of us are going to start voting, literally in the next few days. And I'm going to be talk about strategy for voting, to talk about the kinds of things you need to be passing on to people who don't even have internet access, because there's many people who are voting in this country who don't have access to the internet. The local library that they would normally go to is either closed, or people are very skittish about going to a library. And one other thing about early voting I should tell you: there are a number of cities across this country that are actually conducting their early voting in the open, outside, outdoors. So you really do want to avoid waiting in line on November 3rd. That is the worst thing you could do. You are free to do it, but I think that is the worst strategy. You really, really, really don't want to do that. San Francisco, for example, is one of the cities where the early vote is going to be, at least in some places where the early voting is happening, is going to be conducted outdoors. And again, this is the time right now. I know Labor Day is, right around the corner here in the United States. In other places, obviously, whatever you're doing in your country, and you are an overseas voter to the US, please be proactive. Please look at the dates and deadlines that I have on this link to this video. They are all coming from the Secretary of State's offices. Now, granted, like I said, there are other guides and there are other good websites as well. But as I've said to you in the past, some of these things are not accurate. And what they will end up telling you to do is go to your Secretary of State's website. Well, I've made it easier for people to do that because all of the links are in order, alphabetical order, from A through W, I guess. Right? W, Wyoming's the last state in the alphabet in the US, and Alabama is the first. So from Alabama to Wyoming, I have every single Secretary of State's or Board of Elections website. So all the information is official here on my links. And I can't say that because I've seen one or two I'm not going to mention the names. Well, one of them is vote dot something, rhymes with forg, vote dot forg. People may have found that website helpful, but I've seen in a couple of states, or one state, Rhode Island, where they got that information wrong. I don't know if they've changed it because I've never gone back to that site, but they had said that Rhode Island was not doing early voting. And I tweeted them about it at the time. I don't think they've changed it yet. I don't know. We'll see. Someone can tell me. But they had a few short weeks ago said that Rhode Island has no early voting. And you know what I did since I put this list together from the official Secretary of State's websites for every state? I went, of course, to the Rhode Island Secretary of State's website. And what did she have on that site? Early voting for Rhode Island. Which is why I caution people who are going to these sites, right? These websites that may be good in some areas, but when it comes to the granular specificity of early voting, the deadlines may not be accurate. And that's a sad thing because confusion is our enemy. There are two things, actually three things. The three things that are going to get in your way. Never mind all the stuff with Trump and all this garbage that he's doing. The three things that will really, and the Republicans, the garbage that they're doing, the three things that are going to be your own worst enemy are confusion, procrastination, and fear. Now, some of us may be experiencing one of those three things right now, maybe all of those three things. But I am telling you, those three things are being used against you by the guy in the White House. He wants to confuse you. He wants to make you afraid. And he may be succeeding at that second one. He wants to disorient you. And when you are confused and afraid and disoriented, you do procrastinate. You actually do procrastinate because there's a sense of you're frozen. You really have to find a way out of that somehow. If there are people watching this who are feeling that way, I totally understand why you feel that way. I completely do, and I empathize with you because we've gone through some real hell. Even the average person that has not been affected by coronavirus the way that some of you watching have been, the average person as well is traumatized. We are all living through a sense of trauma, no matter where we are on the planet, particularly here in the US, where we're going to run up to, let's face it, next week, we are going to be we're going to be at 200,000 people passing away. There's a whole trauma around that too. And there's a disorientation. You see people lying like rugs on TV. You know that they're lying. They know that they're lying. You're seeing all this stuff on the news with what's being said. And I get it. People will respond to it, but we've now got to be really vigorous about voting. This is it now, because we literally are the last line of defense. We've seen politicians, Republican senators, cower and run and not convict this guy. We are almost exactly tomorrow, Saturday here in the US, and there are parts of the US that are already in Saturday. It will be exactly 7 months ago, February the 5th, 2020, when Republican senators, except for Mitt Romney, all said, we're going to acquit this guy. That cannot be us. We are not going to do that. We must not have any kind of acquittal. We can't quit and we can't acquit. That is not what Johnny Cochran said. But the point I'm trying to make is now is the time for us to really get going here. Do not wait for your state. Oh, well, my state's They're early voting October the 10th. I'll just wait till then. No, 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 no. I assure you, if you were buying something on a certain uh, website, you wouldn't be procrastinating about it. I guarantee you, I think many people will probably be making it their priority to go and buy whatever that is that they're looking to buy and get and go with it, and they'll rush to it. So the approach should be the same for voting. After all, it's your future, your kids' futures, your friends' futures, your loved ones' futures that are it's in the balance. This is a very important election. And this election is not about Republicans and Democrats. This is not about that. If people are watching this thinking that this is about Republicans versus Democrats, think again. This is about having a country and not having one. This is about having a country and having a fascist dictatorship. And I know there are people who are scoffing at that and saying, oh, no, you're. No, no, no. I am deadly serious. You see what's happening. You see what's happening. I mean, it's happening right in front of your eyes. And there is a certain helplessness about that, quite frankly, because you really do want to be able to do something. Well, you know what? This is the time that you can do something. This is the moment for all of us to use the most powerful tool that we have, and that's our vote. Do not let anybody tell you that you can't use it. Do not let anyone on social media say to you, oh, well, the vote doesn't count. Ugh. No, don't listen to that. That is someone telling you. In fact, that's someone trying to suppress your vote. Oh, I'm going to not vote for either of them. They're both losers. Ooh. Don't trust that nonsense. You have to vote. You see what's in front of you. You know who's destroying the country, and you know who is going to be the alternative to that. And not just the alternative, but someone who's actually going to be able to listen to you. And democracy only works as well as the people who participate in it. That means you and me, all of us watching this, have got to do this. We can't criticize Republican senators for not convicting this guy 7 months ago, and then we don't show up and vote. We can't complain about the way the situation is right now, and then in 2016 we stay home. That is not good enough. Hopefully, some of us have learned from our mistake. And if you are watching this and you did not vote 4 years ago, now is your chance to redeem yourself. And if you can find people that you know who don't want to vote, talk to them for a few minutes. Listen to what they have to say, but then impress upon them how important it is that they vote, especially if they're younger voters or younger people, rather, who feel disillusioned. Listen to them, hear them out, and then tell them why they must vote, not anything else. Tell them why they must vote. Explain what the Supreme Court has done. Explain that this guy in the White House has put on 200 federal judges in 3.5 years, more than any president in their first term, except Jimmy Carter. This is really important. Explain that a woman's right to choose is in severe jeopardy if this guy gets another 4 years. Come to think of it, if this guy gets another 4 years, he won't leave at the end of the next 4 years. I guarantee you he won't. I mean, all of the stuff he's done before we even get to November, if you guys don't vote, and if you don't vote early, you are going to invite this guy in again for another 4 years. And it won't stop at 4. He will stay on for 8. He'll pass it off to Ivanka. You all right, you keep laughing out there. Keep laughing. This is how it starts. I mean, I don't think that anybody watching this wants to experience Belarus, which is going on right now. I don't think anybody wants to experience the 1930s here. But we've had brown kids put in concentration camps. on the southern border. We've had Muslim travel bans, not to mention the amount of black women and black men and brown people being shot dead by cops. There is a better way than this. You have an environment that's at stake. Tell them. Tell these voters. Tell these people who are, oh, I don't want to vote. I'm not sure. Please, this is the work we've got to do. It's about voter education. This is what Joe Madison, who is a really good broadcaster on Sirius XM, channel 126, his nickname is the Black Eagle. He does 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 on the East Coast, 3 to 7 West Coast in the morning. I called him the other day, actually. I'm going to release that very short audio call. I got on the air and said a few things really quickly to him. Here is his three. My three things are: vote early, be proactive, and share information with family and friends and people out there. His three things are voter education, voter registration, and voter participation. And that voter registration thing is so important. And my list of links in this document will feature voter registration deadlines. But I would say to you, please, please do not wait. Voter registration, do that now. Register to vote right now. And if you've already registered to vote, make sure that you check your voter registration at least once a week. I'd say even twice a week at this point. And if so that you have enough time to change it, to re-register, to change it, whatever. But make sure you do that. There's going to be other things I'm going to be adding to this list, including things about signatures. Another great resource would be Greg Palast. I really do recommend that you follow him on Twitter, GREG_P as in Paul, ALA, S as in Sam, T as in Tom. Follow that man on Twitter, please. He has been researching this and investigative reporting on all of these voting issues for 30 years. He throws a lot of information at you, but it's very important. What I'm trying to do here is get you to please pay attention to this. We have to really act as if this is about our lives or deaths. And after all, this last 8 months has been life or death in this country. We've seen Black people being shot down by the cops. We've seen 190,000 people be killed, die from this coronavirus, and this guy in the White House is doing zero about it. He wouldn't even send ventilators. He still has not used the full authority of the Defense Production Act. He wants to turn the page and throw a vaccine at you. Everything he's done is political. Everything. He's politicized everything. Now we have to now give our answer. This election cannot be close. It cannot be close. This has to be a landslide for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It has to be a landslide. So right now, make sure you pass this video around, pass the link to it around, tell everybody you know to vote, text them, email them, YouTube them, Skype them, whatever you have to do. FaceTime them, Zoom them, Instagram, TikTok them, whatever, Snapchat them, tweet them, Facebook them. I don't care what it is, you have to do it, and you have to do it now. Text them, I don't care, whatever, you have to. We need the largest voter turnout in the history of this country. We need to send a resounding message now. This cannot be 4 years ago. Because I think the Biden campaign's actually been pretty good so far. I would like them to go into Latinx neighborhoods much more and also shore up their base amongst Black men, because there are some Black men who are veering over, as there are Latinos doing the same a little bit to Trump. But the point is, I think Joe Biden is running a better campaign at this point. With everything we know, even with this virus, he's running a better campaign than the Democratic nominee 4 years ago. He's gone to Wisconsin more times than she did. He went once for the first time just yesterday, just on Thursday. And he went there once. That's more times than Hillary Clinton went in the general election to Wisconsin. This is it now, folks. Let's get to work. Let's do this. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to be doing more of these videos. Please tell people. Please spread the word. And please look at this list. I'm going to continue to update it. Let's be in that voting mode right now. We have 59 days now. 59 days. Every day, do something. I don't care what it is, whether it's calling people, whether it's volunteering, whether it's donating, whether it's phone banking, whether it is printing up a t-shirt. I'm having t-shirts printed with vote early on them. I want you to do the same. If you can afford it, or if you know someone who can, have them print up t-shirts, hats, buttons, vote early, put it on. I'm telling you, you think I'm kidding about this, some of you. I am dead serious. We have to start doing this now. If you've had enough of the trauma, if you're fed up of it, if you're fed up of being at home, you know, if we had done what New Zealand did, we wouldn't be at home, most of us right now. We would probably be at work, or we would be able to walk around more. And we wouldn't have had this excessive job loss either, most likely. We can do this, folks. I know that things are very edgy, and it's depressing, and it's tough, and it's traumatic. But we are at the hour where, just as it seems as if there's no hope and you feel down and you're despairing, this is the time where we can turn this around and we can absolutely lift ourselves up and lift this country up. Let's defend the country from this terrorist who is lurking in the White House. Let's do that. We the people, remember? That's what the first three words of this Constitution are. We the people. And that guy in the White House is crapping all over us right now. He's crapping all over that Constitution. If we do this together and we early vote the first day of early voting, nothing is going to stop us. I'm telling you, nothing. I don't care what scare tactics they talk about. And I'm not saying that they're beyond that, because they're not beyond it. But they don't know who we are. And they're going to see who we are over these next few days and weeks. So let's start with the early voting. Let's get educated. Thank you so much again for listening on this night. I know for some people it's very late, some people it's very early in the morning, and other people are, I don't know, having a good time in the afternoon or evening. Thank you so much. Please be safe. Let's get going here. Now is the time. Early vote, please. Thank you very much.